Salutations upon Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Respected elders, dear friends, members of the diplomatic corps, Haron family, and the elders that are here, particularly those who shared times with Imam Haron and in fact sat at the feet of Imam Haron. To all of you, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We mark the commemoration of Imam Abdullah Haron at a time when there is a confluence of a number of events, and it evokes a deep sense of pathos, emotion, and when one reflects on the thoughts and ideas of Imam Abdullah Haron, and in this instance through the pages of Muslim news and Muslim views, we remember the supreme sacrifice of the Imam for the cause of justice. We also remember the sacrifice of his widow, Auntie Khalima. And tomorrow, the 29th of September, will be 4 years to the day of her passing. Exactly 50 years after the Imam was buried, and we say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them the highest place in Jannah. My presentation, and there's an event that dovetails with this one, so I'll put on my timer, and I don't know how much time we have, but I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible without really losing the essence. So it is a bit of a challenge. My presentation actually covers a period, really an era, that spans 62 years and 10 months. The 16th of December, it will actually be 63 years. And that is from December 1960 to September 2023. What do we learn about the Imam and the broader community that he was part of and that he served with absolute commitment, leading to the supreme stage of martyrdom? We hope to learn from this brief presentation, and I say brief because when I started researching, I was just telling Muhammad before the presentation that I realized we probably need about 3 sessions for the 3 periods of publication that I would be covering. So to start off, I have split the 60 odd years into 3 periods, and the first period, I looked at Muslim news editions from December 1960 to the 23rd of May 1969, less than a week before the detention of Imam Haron. Imam Haron was detained on the 28th of May 1969. Now this is the period when the Imam was officially the editor of the newspaper, and I would think the de facto editor of Muslim News. And as I go through, you will understand the distinction that I make between the official editor and the de facto editor of Muslim News. But there is an interesting development editorially from about April 1968 until Imam's detention. I call this the period of Imam's position as honorary editor. And in fact, in some of the editions of Muslim News, Imam is actually referred to as the honorary editor. The first few months until March 1961, Imam's own writings in Muslim News seem to be aimed at addressing issues of moral conduct, moral development, And this is evident in the inaugural editions from the Mimbar column. In later editions, guest imams were invited to contribute to this column. But the inaugural from the Mimbar was written by Imam Abdullah Haron as editor. During this period too, Imam explained the rules of fiqh and the fundamental beliefs of a Muslim. So this was the early period. Then a clearly discernible change clicks in. This is timed with the Imam's increased direct involvement in the struggle for justice. I think it's a very important and significant development. So I'll just go through some slides, and it's just by way of illustration as I go through. We see the coverage after a few months, and this is in April 1961, 28th April 1961, which is about 4 months into the establishment of Muslim News. We see the coverage of the historic Call of Islam Declaration, and which Imam signed, and this appeared on the front page of Muslim Views. It's not actually this particular edition. That happened on the 31st of March 1961. This is then followed by a series of front pages. It's a sequel to that declaration, culminating in a call for a convention of Muslims, and the spokesperson for that movement is none other than Imam Abdullah Haron. So he's the editor of the newspaper, and so some of the more conventional journalists may say, you don't become the story. The reporter is not the story, certainly not the editor. But Imam Haron had no such misgivings. He had a mission, I think, and that mission was to get the message through, to get people to be active. And he used the platform that he had as editor of Muslim News. So these are some of the front pages that I referred to. And this is an interesting one. Muslims plan a convention. And Imam Haron is editor at this time. He is quoted as the spokesperson for the movement that is planning this convention. And this is in 1961, the early period of 1961. Given the time constraints, of course, I will not go through the entire period. Suffice to say that Imam Haron, as editor, not only shaped the content of the paper to address socio-political issues, but it was also, at the same time, in the trenches fighting for justice and freedom. So, you'll see the next slide, admission. Muslims refused admission to Nyanga. So this was a delegation that was going to go to Nyanga, delegation of Muslims. But we know, and we're not going to go into detail now, but we know Imam used his cover as a sales representative for a sweet company, and he used that to actually go into the township, and he had a dual mission really, the way, through other readings. One was going through with the rest of his clergy, the members of the MJC and others. That was quite overt, but I think the more, if you want to use the term, subversive interaction he had in the townships was undercover as a sales rep for the sweet company that he worked for. Earlier, I alluded to an interesting sabotage bill, Imam Haron addressing the crowd at the old drill hall, And these are some of those pages. Actually, I'm jumping the gun there, but we'll stop there with that period. So I alluded to this very interesting development in the editorial coverage of Muslim news, beg your pardon, from around April 1968. Now there is a complete shift with the April 1968 edition. Splashing on its front page, Imam Haron is the editor, but there's the shift, and I sort of tried to work this out. How did this happen? The headline said on the front page, inauguration of the state president. That's not post-1994. It was an uncritical piece on the swearing in of the apartheid president, J.J. Fouché. That was in 1968, April 1968. Where was the editor when it was decided to run the story? The period up to Imam's detention coincided with his travels and deeper involvement in the struggle for liberation. And maybe Muhammad, you have really researched this period, so you would have the exact dates, Muhammad Haron, but I see it during that period, 1968, towards the end, going into 1969. Imam was more out of the paper than in the paper. And there was a definite shift in how Muslim news covered issues. I would use the term, it became more parochial. Muslim news was during this period essentially run by an editorial team. Imam Haron appears again in Muslim news on the 7th of May 1969. It's significant. And it's under the headline, Editor Conveys Thanks. So he's still the editor, conveys his thanks for what? He acknowledges the support of those whom he met and who enabled his trip to the Middle East and Europe. And he thanks them for making it a success. So this kind of ties in with this very skewed coverage that Muslim news or the editorial content. And this ushers in the second period that I researched, May 1969, post-detention to December 1975. Imam is detained on the 28th of May 1969. And how does the newspaper of which he is officially the editor respond? How does it respond? And I use the word shamelessly. It could be stronger terms. And I'll just quote from the editorial under the headline, Editor Detained. And I quote, the reason for his, Imam Haron's detention, is not known to Muslim news. This is what the editorial says. But it is safe to assume that Imam Haron is not being detained for his religious views. Further it says, if Imam Haron is being held because of his political views, then there is nothing Muslim news can do about this situation. As Imam Haron's position as editor was to express the religious aspects of the community. This was the position in an editorial taken by the newspaper of which Imam Haron was the editor. It's a very difficult, I still grapple with it. My research, and I don't think I would want to dig too much into it, but maybe in future. Who wrote the editorial? Was it a collective? Was it one single person? They probably all passed on, but it was painful. Reading it now is as painful as it must have been to those close to the Imam at that time. In the first edition after Imam Haron's detention, an organization, the Muslim Assembly, takes center stage. Remember, Imam is now detained, and Muslim Assembly takes center stage, and up until the news of the killing of the Imam, the entire period, 123 days, the front page is dominated, and I say this in all seriousness, by cheese. Yes, cheese. The front page of editions from 6 June 1969 to 12 September 1969 are dominated by the cheese controversy. Is it halal or not? Serious. And not a paragraph on the detention of Imam Haron. With this, I asked the question, was this a reflection of the community's apathy? Was it just an editorial team that decided, look, we need to concentrate on other more mundane issues? This is indeed, in fact, a subject for further research. But we do have an excellent paper, I must add, by Ursula Gunther, The Memory of Imam Haron in Consolidating Muslim Resistance in the Apartheid Struggle, which touches upon some of these aspects. I just want to bring up a point which came through my research, where I do differ with Ursula Gunther on a conclusion she makes. So she says that this position that Muslim news took influenced the position of the Muslim Judicial Council. I would like to think that we as journalists and as publishers do have the power to influence a body like the Muslim Judicial Council or whatever. But I really, when I looked through the editions in my research, I think it's more the other way around. And so there were certainly members of the Muslim Judicial Council who were regular visitors and maybe even part of the structure at Muslim News during that period. So it's an area that needs to be researched, certainly. A week after the killing of the Imam on the 3rd of October 1969, as you'll see there, two staff members of Muslim News, Mr. James Matthews and Abdul Sayed, they put out a special supplement, tribute to a humble man. This, it is believed, and this is through conversations that I had with Mr. James Matthews and Abdul Qayyum, this was done independently. It was outside of the editorial board of the paper. What it did do, though, is perhaps create some sort of, stirred some sort of conscience. Because a week later, on the 10th of October, the newspaper does publish an official tribute on the front page, an article on the left-hand side, and a front page editorial tribute to an alim. Very interesting choice of headline. Both, however, steer clear of stressing Imam Haron's social justice struggles, and they're not very specific. There is in the tribute an allusion to Imam stood for truth and didn't compromise, but very, very carefully written. Up to the mid-70s, following that, there is a clear absence of coverage or analysis of the pernicious impact of apartheid on the lives of those races. So we have this tribute, it's almost, a box that has been ticked, and that's it. And I found some very interesting articles, and as I said, one could really go in depth and kind of get an understanding of, and I think earlier when I shared with Zubeida a note to say, maybe this maps the kind of Muslim involvement in the struggle for social justice, at least in the Cape. For example, on the 23rd of February 1973, there is a 4-page supplement, and guess who is the feature all about? The person who made the news a couple of weeks ago. The headline screams, Buthelezi, People's Choice. In the Muslim news, 4 pages dedicated to Buthelezi and his family, the queen or the princess, and all his entourage. This supplement was to acknowledge his presence as guest of honor at the trade fair organized by the Muslim Assembly. That was in 1973. And I know as kids, okay, I wasn't a kid at that time, I think I was just out of high school. It was my first year out of high school, and I remember the trade fair. It was quite an occasion in the community. But the presence of not only Buthelezi, but we also had, in fact, I think the trade fair had one of the reps from the American consulate as well. So this was the kind of, and Muslim Assembly and Muslim news had a very close relationship at that time. The final period that we look at, and I think I've got about 5 minutes or so. Here I look at it the period from the 6th of June 1975 to the present. So I'll go through this very quickly. But I think it's important to look at the shift. And I know there were gasps of horror when we spoke about the editorial, and rightfully so. But there is a healthy shift. And I just want to mention, at this time, I joined the paper a bit later. We went to see the late Abdullah Umar, our first Minister of Justice, but he was an attorney at that time. And we went to his house, I as the junior reporter and four members of the editorial board, to ask Abdullah Umar to act as the attorney on call for Muslim news. And after a very healthy discussion, he declined. And his reason was the 1969 editorial. Of course, a few months later, maybe years later, he was the attorney for Muslim news. And that was largely because of a shift. It takes a firm political stance at a time when corporate media was either supportive or silent on apartheid, and at best, coming up with a liberal approach to placate the call for true liberation. Muslim news forms part of the alternative media, a platform for the aspirations of the oppressed. This is the period when, and I need to mention this person, Abdul Quddus Sayyid takes on the role of chair of the editorial board, and he gives more scope to people like James Matthews and Abdul Qayyum. So on the 6th of June, soon after an internal coup, we can call it, Mr. James and Abdul Qayyum produce a front page piece on Crossroads, highlighting the devastating impact on the lives of people governed by apartheid capitalist system of oppression. Migrant labor actually featured very strongly in that piece, and job preservation. I joined Muslim News shortly after this shift in editorial direction, so I think I chose my moment very carefully. And it is in this period that I learned much about Imam Haron. So, yes, Muslim News, there's a period that one wants to sort of erase out of its history, but it's there, it's reality, and I think that is how we all develop. But there is also a period where one is then encouraged to join Muslim News, and I think Imam Haron comes to the fore. Being part of the editorial discussions, it is clear that those driving the paper at that time were intent on bringing back the ethos that Imam Haron had established in the earlier years, speaking fearlessly in the face of injustice. As an aside, there was a tasbih, the prayer beads, belonging to Imam Haron, the one with the 33 beads. And the organizers of Ilm, I'm looking at them directly, unfortunately, it was given to Ilm as part of an exhibition, and it has somehow disappeared. Not to make anyone feel guilty, but I see with you, really, you were not responsible. But something about that prayer bead, and I think the spiritual presence of Imam Haron is very important there. So we used to have fortnightly editorial board meetings on a Monday, fortnightly, so a week before publication. And it normally, because there were two other people who had full-time jobs, we would meet after Maghrib. And the Imam would either be Abdul Qudus or Ibrahim Deen. They would take the prayer bead and the tasbih after the salah, quite consciously use the prayer beads that Imam Haron used. And the dua would say, "Oh Allah, guide us to fulfill the mission and the vision of Imam Abdullah Haron." So it was that close and that deep. And this led to Muslim News then taking this bold stand and fully recognizing Imam Abdullah Haron. And as you can see, that headline, it's not a very creative front page, but it's a very loud front page. It says, "Imam Abdullah Haron, a tribute." It was one of, this almost like a tabloid-sized newspaper. And I'm going to now push through. So let me now at this point just run through the slides and give a short commentary. Okay. So we have, this is a very significant edition. I just need to really, just to talk about this one. This is the 10th anniversary of the martyrdom of Imam Haron. This particular event was one that drew in a number of organizations. This is where we see organizations coming to the fore and identifying openly with the stand and the position that Imam Haron took. So if you'll see, this edition had a headline, "Tribute to a Martyr." So from my research, this is the first occasion that Imam Haron is referred to as a martyr. And I must just say, in later years, an alim, a sheikh, contested that. He said, "Why do we call Imam Haron a martyr?" And it was earlier I was speaking to Uncle Frank van der Horst about A.B. Adams. A.B. Adams actually wrote a piece rebutting that particular sheikh who made that comment. And as we go through, this is still part of the supplement, message to the oppressors and their supporters all around Imam Haron. Social context of Muslims in South Africa. Imam Haron was the kind of fulcrum around which this activism revolved at that time. A message to the oppressed people. Very interesting read. And then homage to a martyred Imam. And here we see some key figures. We see Imam Ibrahim Davids, Imam Ahmed Qasim, Sheikh Faik Khalildin, and Maulana Jamaluddin Hamdullah, and I think the Qari there is Faiz Desai. Now this is an interesting one. Imam betrayed by silent colleagues. It says by a special correspondent. So the special correspondent was A.B. Adams, Abdurrahman Manti Adams. He wrote that piece, 17th October 1980. And I got a call from a sheikh, and he looked at the piece and he says, we know who wrote it, and the person who wrote it, I just want to tip you off, he's an Ahmadi sympathizer. So we've heard that line before. And so I think my time is up now. So I'm just going to conclude with just to give you an oversight of what happens at Muslim News. And then Mrs. Harun, a lady with courage and faith. I think it's important because not often and not often enough acknowledged. Muslim Views, where we are now. So the front page talks about the Imam's legacy. And it makes it quite clear that Muslim News Views will continue the legacy of Imam. So that unfortunately brings me to the end. And I just want to actually, that's September 2023. Just in closing, I must acknowledge a few people, who really informed me and continue to do so on the coverage and life of Imam Abdullah Haron. First, Mr. James Matthews and Abdul Qayyum Sayed, Imam Ibrahim Sheikh Davids, Imam Yusuf Abdul Latif, the students of Imam Haron, and among them, Uncle Hassan Gila, Uncle Abdul Qadir Naboza, Imam Dawood Lobi, and then we have Maulana Jamaluddin Hamdullah, who was the first person to actually come forward and initiate a commemoration for Imam Abdullah Haron, Imam Ahmed Qasim, and those with whom I was honored to serve on the Imam Haron 50th Commemoration Committee, and of course the Haron family. I thank the Imam Haron Foundation and its partners, Awqaf SA, the Muslim Thinker, Islamia College, and my colleagues, past and present, at Muslim News and Muslim News. I see Shafiq is there as well, a colleague at Muslim News, and Mahmoud and the rest at Muslim News. I thank you for the opportunity to reflect on the life of Imam Haron. We pray that this reflection will serve to commit one to the struggle for justice, for which Imam offered the ultimate sacrifice. We pray to Allah to grant Shaheed Imam Haron the company of the beloved Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the prophets, the righteous, and the martyrs. I thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Brother Farid Sayed. Just before the MC takes over, we just have your indulgence, asking your indulgence. So what we did was, a few weeks ago, the Imam Haron commemorative rugby tournament was taking place at Primrose Cricket and Rugby Field around the corner. And we had under 10s, 11s, 12s, 13, 14, 15, 17 and 18s participating. And what Uncle Muhammad Haron told me, why don't we get the kids here to the auditorium to the award ceremony, because the Imam was a community activist, he was a religious leader, he was a family man, he was a sportsman as well. So when I sent out the message to the rugby tournament coordinator, he said, no problem, they're going to come. And luckily, yesterday I asked him, Ahmed, how many people are you bringing? And he said, under 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17. So I said, Ahmed, you're not telling me how many people. And we're thinking two, the winners and the losers, the representatives, first and second, and maybe a coach. And then he sends a message last night, 850 people. So what we've done was, thanks to Islamia, we've got the quad where 850 people are currently assembled. And we were supposed to come and move all of you over to the quad, but we can't do that now, so when this program is concluded, we would like you to join us on that side, but in the interim I'm going to ask representatives of the family so that the under 10s, 11s, 12s, 13, 14, 15, 17s and 18s don't get frustrated by 850. Anyway, the Imam Haron display panels are up, so they are being educated about the life of the Imam. But I'm going to grab some of the family members in case you assuming what's happening, etc. That's the context, that's what's happening. So please, if you can after the program, join us in the quad, we'll be much appreciated. Shukran.
Thank you, Brother Mikhail. Again, shukran, Brother Farid, for that insightful information that cursory grants in terms of Muslim news and, of course, where Muslim views are situated today. So, shukran. Our respondent to his insightful presentation is, of course, none other than Zubeida Jaffer. In brief, Zubeida Jaffer is an award-winning journalist, author, and activist. She has used the pen in the spoken word for the past 43 years to recording experiences in South Africa and beyond. She's a graduate of 3 universities and most recently was awarded the honorary doctorate at the 4th. She's one of the first female Muslim woman journalists in South Africa and has supported efforts to build a just and free South Africa away from historical injustices and remain committed to this ordeal through all the present upheavals. So we welcome Zubeida Jaffer. Shukran for your energy and your time for being with us in responding to Farid Sayed.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everybody. Molweni. Ninjani. I must say that Farid Sayed deserves a big hand of applause. Because what he is not saying, what he has sketched and what he is not actually saying, is that the effort that has come over many, many years has preserved the story and has made it possible for us today to fully understand and be aware of all the challenges that we have lived through. Farid, I can't comment on, I would love to comment on all these things, but of course now the Adnan has said that I've only got 10 minutes. So I shall have to, really tighten it. But Farid, I want you to know that long, long ago, at the North Pole, there's a community, Inuit community, which was called Eskimos in a derogatory way. So the Inuit community, and they had this practice, they had this belief that when the community faced a crisis, when the community was possibly facing extinction, then, or destruction, the person that, or the people that they had to offer the most protection to were the storytellers. And why did they think they had to do that? Because they believed that if the storyteller did not die, then there was a chance that the memory of the community could live on. So the memory of the community. So Farid, I want to tell you that if we had that practice, you would be the most protected person. But obviously our values have changed, but so if we think of that the memory of the community, the memory of storytelling abilities should live on, we can also remind us that Muslims invest in memorization of the Quran for precisely the same reason, so that we don't lose, let's call it, the stories. Now, Muslim Views was founded 63 years ago, and is a more modern sliver of this kind of impulse, you know. We use newspapers. Today we use social media. And the tradition of recording and preserving the story is a very, very important thing for us, because it tells us who we are. It tells us, it shapes the way we think about ourselves, and it influences who we become and continue to be. Farid's presentation provides us with a sense of the life of one story and how Muslim News and Muslim Views has covered or failed to cover it. What a privilege it is to be able to look back after over 54 years and analyze our evolution as a community. And Farid, you are right. It tells, you know, that story. And some of what Farid has told us is not pretty. I mean, the editorial against the Imam is shameful. And the story about the cheese had to make me smile, because I remember when I was a young student, I said to my father, I joined the MSA and they put me off Islam forever. And I told my father that I cannot be part I cannot respect a leadership that prefers to focus on cheese and not on justice. And so when Farid said there was cheese on the front pages, I had to smile, because as a young person, that was left with me. That the amount of fat, the amount of animal fat, non-halal animal fat in the cheese was very, very important. The drop of animal fat in the cheese was very, very important. Nobody ever spoke about justice and, you know, the collective rights of people. They spoke about cheese. And we've seen before, we've seen over time, we speak about Coke, we speak about biscuits, we speak about all these things. How absurd. You know, it really has got, it's about healthy eating. It's not about whether there's a drop of something in there. It's about we should eat what is healthy. But Farid, thank you for reminding me about the cheese story. Now, despite the not so nice pieces of information that Farid has given us, we can proudly say that the story of the Imam has prevailed not only because of the media coverage, but because of the family and the Haron family and a small circle of people who have worked tirelessly to ensure that it did not die. The Harun family gave us their father and years of their lives in our quest to be a fair and just country. And this must never be forgotten. The killing of the Imam had a profound effect on me, as it had on Farid. And I would like to share the story of my experience with you, but I'm afraid that the time is so limited. So let me just quickly mention some of the other points that I want to make, and if we have time, then I will tell you how it affected me. I grew up into adulthood with a verse from the Holy Quran which said, God does not change the condition of a people or a nation unless they change themselves from within. And over the past few years, I've come to the realization that my understanding of this verse was limited. As a young adult in the throes of the anti-apartheid struggle, I took it to mean that people have to change their conditions themselves and that nobody would do it for them. I did not understand, and I want you to listen very carefully because it's been an insight that I've gained recently, well, not too recently, but over the past few years. I did not understand that changing material conditions was one thing and transforming one's inner life another. And we as activists for change focused on changing the outer conditions of a people with less attention to their inner lives. There was minimal understanding that the greatest enemy was within. How we think about ourselves. The movie we keep watching in our minds determines who we become. And this is a very dangerous moment for us in the world. And I'm glad that the Imam's family and those who worked didn't lose sight of what they wanted to achieve. They kept on with the commitment to justice and fairness for Imam and for all of us. But at this point in our history, with all that is going on in the world and in our country, we are tending to play, a movie in our minds that says how bad we are. It just says that. It doesn't focus us on what the possibility is we can do. The Bible suggests something similar in Romans 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. So this is a message. I couldn't, unfortunately, get a quote from the Torah, but I'd hope to do that. But this is very fundamental. And Muslim views and the story that Farid outlined and that he told me he was going to outline made me feel that it was able to shape the story, a very fundamental story, which helps to hold us. It's not just the story of a grave injustice, it's also a story of a fight for justice and for standing up to what was unjust. Now, we've spoken about the memorialization and the memorization, and I just want to quickly mention that two of those who memorized the Quran and studied to memorize the Quran were shot down in cold blood recently. We could surely object if the Muslim views were arbitrarily shut down. And yet when Hafiz Umar Majid and Hafiz Tawfiq Cummings, two young men, were murdered in Hanover Park recently, there is once again only a handful of us that object. We have to keep this injustice alive. We have to tell their story. This is part of who we are. And we have to draw the lessons from the Imam Haron story to take us into the future, and not to look back only, but to take us into the future. I don't think I've got time to tell you my personal story, but I'm just going to say, where's Adnan? You want me to? Just quickly, I was 11 years old when Imam Haron died, and I remember it as clearly as yesterday. And the reason why I remember it is that my family was very deeply affected. My parents took this very, very, very hard. And the afternoon of his burial, my father phoned my mom. I'm not quite sure how she did it, but he said to her, you must bring the children. And you must bring the children to Grootskie Hospital at the top of, there at the back of the hospital. And then we could, because only the men went to the Kabristan, and so that we could see the thousands upon thousands of people. Now, I'm a young child, I'm 11 years old, and I'm seeing all this. And I'm hearing that how the Imam was killed, and it's impacting on me. And then years later, in 1980, when I was a reporter, journalist, when I was sleeping, it was the middle of the night, when my father came to wake me up. I didn't hear anything. My father came to wake me up. And he said to me that the security police were there, and that I had to get up. And I looked at him. I think I was probably naive, very naive. So I said, Daddy, don't worry, I'll speak to them. I was 22 years old. I don't know what I was thinking. And then my father's eyes changed. And he looked at me and he said, it's Spyker van Wyk himself, the man who killed Imam Haron, in our house. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that? And then I went on this journey. First thing, he put his arm around me as we were going out of the house, and he said to me, I said to him, are you taking me to Paulsmoor prison? And he said, I'm taking, Paulsmoor prison is a 5-star hotel compared to where you're going. And indeed it was. Alan, as you know, Dr. Alan Zinner's here, he was detained at the same time. And my life was never the same again. They beat me, they drugged me, they interrogated me till I was unconscious. And the Imam was never far away from that whole process, because they kept on saying to me, this is the man who killed the Imam. They used that to manipulate me or scared me by saying, this is the man who killed the Imam. I can speak on and on about this, Adnan, but I think I would end here so that people can have a discussion. Thank you very, very much.
Shukran, Zubeida. Appreciate it. I think the notion of muhasabah is important in terms of reflection as a community, as an individual, in terms of moving forward. In terms of justice, yes, we need to do it for ourselves. Nobody's going to do it for us. At this point, there's a Q&A session, and of course, Professor Muhammad Harun will join. Just a few ground rules in terms of this session. We can keep it to a minimum of a minute if you have a statement to make, and then of course you can ask the question. I think it's a roving by. Just by a show of hands, and of course we can entertain you in terms of acknowledged. There's a even start on that side. We keep it brief, and then of course we can go through as many questions. You can even decide who you want to. The Imam, yeah. Can you go ahead, Imam? The mic. I think he's probably going to switch on the mic on that side. Just give it a second. Yeah. Yeah.
Whilst we're waiting, I think maybe if I may.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Prophet. Yeah. Yes.
I think from what you had heard from Farid's presentation, he just touched the surface. We've also looked at the Muslim news then and the type of reporting that emerged from it. But I think what's important in all of this is that that transition was indeed a very fascinating one. Fascinating, not so much, of course, from it. It's a sad one partly, but it's also an important one as one looks at the Cape Muslim community through the eyes of Muslim youth. And of course, the paper itself tried to represent aspects of the community in its own ways. And in a sense, when perhaps I should also just quickly say this, that which we forgot to perhaps emphasize or state, that the day he was taken, which was 28th of May 1969, coincided with Maulud. So we supposed to have had this event last night, but we decided to shift it to tonight as a result of that sort of coincidence. That said, I think what we need to just bear in mind is that the Imam has been a very spiritual man. I mean, apart from the deeds, that story that Farid mentioned, he fasted every Mondays and Thursdays since the time he returned from Mecca, where he studied. That is just before World War II. And so his life was studied in spirituality in different ways. Despite the fact from the photos that you have seen, he enjoyed dressing beautifully. He had suits that were cut for him, made for him. And so he did not necessarily just have a thobe, as many of our Imam or Shuyukh basically have, which basically underlines that he sort of moved in different circles, but he kept his spirituality quite sort of deep, very personal. And on top of it, just to conclude with this point, which Zubeida sort of in a sense ended with, he was, now there were some, how shall I put it, let me just, I'm trying to be careful. There were individuals who seemed to doubt that he was Hafiz of the Quran, he memorized the Quran. For what reason this person seemed to have doubts, I have problems with. Partly because I've been with my father in the car. Whenever we drove, he used to recite the Quran. There was not a moment, as far as I can recall, that he did not recite. And some of us have heard the clip where he recited in Salawih prayers, in the what we call the rest prayer during the fasting month of Ramadan. And he used to lead them on many occasions. And of course, that's the platform where he encouraged many of the young individuals to memorize and to lead the prayer. So in other words, he was always open to bringing in young men and women. So I'll just stop there. I'm not sorry.
Yeah. Shukran, you can.
Shukran. I really enjoyed the presentation that was made pertaining to the Muslim news and the different periods. There is something of concern though, is that there was mention of the MJC specifically, and also regarding the issue of the cheese. And first of all, the Muslim news had a board which challenged the position of the Sheikh pertaining to the cheese issue. Imam Haron was part of the Muslim news board against the MJC on that particular issue of the cheese, which was in the Muslim news articles. Secondly, Muslim news condemned on various occasions the MJC in later editions from 1967 onwards. And this is the shift that happened between the establishment of Muslim Assembly and the establishment of Majlis Shura Islami under the Muslim Judicial Council. this is something important just to take this community out of the kind of sectarian thinking of the creating the impression of the ulama having, how they say, being the reason that Imam Harun was arrested and imprisoned. We all know clearly in the letter that was written, and it is on Khalid Shamis's document.
Could we get to your question, Sheikh?
Imam Harun specifically mentioned who's the person that gave out information in London and gave it to the security branch. So, inshallah, I just want to conclude it.
I'm not sure whether anyone wants to comment on that because it's not real. You will. No?
Yeah, shukran for that comment. I think, of course, due to constraints in time, but I do mention the entry of Muslim Assembly, but that does not necessarily, in my view, absolve the Muslim Judicial Council at that time of responsibility as well, not for the killing, and I don't think anyone has pointed fingers at the MJC or any ulama. I think that's, that would be very far-fetched and dangerous. But I think what they do say, and the Muslim news constantly sort of pointed out, that Imam was not really remembered by his colleagues. Imam Haron was a member of the Muslim Judicial Council. So just for the record, I just want to make a quick point. What I've said really is not hearsay. It's based on documentary evidence. It's based on facts. There have been, in fact, I've some posts on Facebook taking certain writings in Muslim news. Now, during that period, a lot of the stuff that was written didn't have a byline from the early years for various reasons, security, or people just felt, who will write, and sometimes there were these underhand attacks, and particularly the column Moving Finger, I'm talking of the 70s. And so, there are some people who say, though, that is how Imam Harun thought. So Muhammad Harun spoke about spirituality, Imam Harun fasting, but also Imam Harun going to the Kraman. So, I saw a post on Facebook where Muslim News had an article, something about the false tukums and the false murshids, etc. And that person attributed that article to Imam Harun. So we need to be very careful as well about who we attribute certain pieces to.
Yeah. Shukran. Anyone with it? Down. You're in front, and then at the back there. If you can keep it brief and many questions as possible.
Shukran. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Again, just Brother Farid, thank you very much for the very insightful position. I want to touch on the theme that's coming through, but I actually want to name it and call it the role of Muslims as house niggers and slave niggers, as collaborators and as liberators. It's a topic that we don't talk about, but it's always been there. We're very comfortable to talk about cheese, but we're not really so comfortable to talk about the justice of the day. So, Sister Jaffer, thanks for raising the issues of the day. Just your comments on that?
Another 5 minutes. Is it on?
Yes, Honor.
It's on.
Look, in any community, in different communities, and in any society, there's always lots of layers of lots of positions, And it is true, because I grew up with a story that my father told me that there wasn't support for Imam Haron, and there wasn't proper support for the family. So from small, I grew up with that. And I grew up with the fact that, there was the leadership that we had didn't take a stand. So um, I almost accept that, Farid. I accept that because we are all frail human beings and we are able to carry different burdens. And so lots of people, they can't. It's very difficult. And so they choose to, I wouldn't like to say hide, but they can't take a stand. But what I feel that is, I'm very proud of the Muslim community, that there were enough people who took a stand. There were enough people who pushed through. And there were enough people to make an impression and shifting, the injustice away. So it's not looking at, oh, all of us, we can't do certain things. It's looking at how amazing we have been in that some of us, and led at the forefront by Imam Haron, some people were able to push forward. And that pushing forward pulls the rest of the community with it. But it's inevitable. You look at any country, any country, there are some people who step up, and there's some people who just can't. And I think we need to accept that and not pillory ourselves sort of attack people too much. We have to say, how far can they go? How far can they go? How far can we push them? And get as many people on side as possible. And right now, getting people on side, I believe, is that we need leaders, we need people who will stand up and give people hope. We don't need this thing of telling ourselves that we are so bad and so hopeless and we haven't achieved anything. We need to say, we're in a very difficult situation, but in order to climb the mountain, we have to acknowledge our magnificence. Because we have been magnificent. But sadly, we are in all the sort of the weakest points are now on display. And so the question is, what is the role of an enlightened leadership at this point? Thank you.
The show of hands. I think it's someone at the back here, female at the back.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I would just like to say shukran so much for sharing your story. Unfortunately, apartheid or colonialism has really created a trauma within the community and it's not spoken about. Our people and our heroes are not spoken about enough. And it is with great pride that I do believe that we as people can move forward because of them, because they have set the example to do so. It's just unfortunately our story is not being spoken about enough. And my question for you is that do you perhaps have a plan of action for this? Because that colored girl, that colored little boy, they don't know who our true heroes really are, what they really have done. And to me, what I have seen as a mother is because our stories haven't been told loudly enough, those children who's going to be the leaders of tomorrow don't have that pride within them because they don't know that this is actually where I come from. I come from people who took a stand. I come from people that made a difference and awareness. So that is my question for you. Do you perhaps have a plan of action to give our little children stories about our heroes and what the goodness that they have done? And inshallah, I pray that the positivity and all the impact, the sacrifices, it's something that will be acknowledged, appreciated, and that should definitely be, as us as people of light, to move forward with that, because throughout the darkness, that is the light that's really going to create the biggest change, I believe.
Anyone of you? You can go first.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and I think it's more than a question, it's a challenge really. I think Zubeida describes us as storytellers, and I think it is our role, our responsibility to actually tell the stories. And I think we have not done enough. Imam Haron's story has been captured, it's been narrated. There are so many others. And what we have done, in fact, in this last edition of Muslim Views, there was the story of the Kahar family. So it's a family, well-known in the sense of, not in an elite sense of the word, but a very big family and related to the Savals, etc. And it's through their story, I'm just using that as an example, that we hear about the heroic positions that our leaders, our elders took, men and women. And so I accept your question as a challenge, and thank you for actually raising the issue.
I just want to respond to the last speaker. We also have to recognize that if you take post-1994, we had Muslim News as an institution, and then you had Al before 94. We had a few media outlets, and it's important to build these institutions. But let's look at post-94. We've just flourished. We've got Muslim radio stations, we've got TV stations, we've got, so many different possibilities. And so it's very strange that within all of that, we seem to be having difficulty in keeping our children and our young people's minds fully informed. So I don't have a simple solution to that, but I feel that we just have to keep on repeating stories, and we have to, as parents, be careful, not only as parents, but everybody, the words that we use. Words matter. And when you denigrate people, as a rule, and I hear it on the WhatsApp, it's shocking what people say. But people are involved in denigrating other people. You can say you disagree with a person, but you can't say, kind of insult the person and go on like that and be racist. And that's another elephant in the room. We are not talking about the fact that there's a great deal of racism within our community. In Harun, I saw it on display. And on the bus, in all of that, we, all of us, we talk about the black man that's coming down the road, and the black people who are in the car, or the black people who are now moving into Weinberg. Shocking. The Nabi, 1400 years ago, on Arafat spoke about 3 evils, and it's still the evils. And yet we don't study his speech, his last speech, in our madrasas. He spoke against, now Arab is better than the non-Arab, right? So he spoke about racism, he spoke about the rights of women. Women have rights equal to men, and he spoke against usury, which is excessive profit-making. Right? Those 3 things. And 1400 years later, we still don't get the message. We still don't get the message. So we have to encourage each other to speak properly and use words that don't demean other people. We have to do that as a first step.
Shukran, Zubeida. We can go for 2 more questions. One right at the back and probably this uncle over here.
Hallo, baie dankie. My naam is Katu van die Churches. En ek praat Indians, want ons allemaal speak versies. We all speaking English. And it is a symbol, the English is a symbol of our colonization. That we are indigenous people, but we relate to each other in a foreign language. And that foreign language is also something that came across the seas to Africa to divide us. And what is taking place tonight is how we sell each other out. I think that is the painful thing that is presented tonight. Is that we are a people who have been traumatized, a people who are living in abject poverty, but for other activists, we speak of, we have flourished after 1994. How can we speak of us flourishing after 1994 when our people are being killed every day, our people are dying? And the dying and the killing and the division that we experience is based on a foreign culture that still exists today. Apartheid hasn't died. We are the most divided people, we are the most unequal society, but yet we say that we talk about the struggle as if it's something in the past, as if the struggle ended in 1994. So, I want to make the point, and I'm not a sir, no? So, the Imam, we must not let the Imam's death, the death of Ashley Creel, of Colin, of Chris Hani, be in vain, because it is coming across that they all died for this society that we experience today. So we have got a lot, the activists of the 80s, we've got a lot to answer, to say that we won, we've been liberated, but the wealth of our land is still in foreign hands. The economy is still in foreign hands. The culture is still a foreign culture. Dit is die ons taal wat ons praat. So our liberation is around the corner. The 1994 is a fake liberation. En ek het hier vraag nie, ek maak 'n stelling. Is that we must start distinguishing between lies and the truth, because we are peddling lies that freedom came in 1994. Thank you.
Dankie meneer. Die volgende vraag, laaste een hiervoor.
Ik zie een vraag. I want to lecture towards it because I see someone.
If you brief, then we can take another question.
Ik heb een vraag niet. I want to emphasize what I told you because I think you missed the point there. As the target audience, you know, and who are you targeting in your newspaper? Because the media, many of the media people are here. We complain about the youngsters, you know, all that. But are they the target audience in what you present? Okay, that's it.
We're going to just half a second,
okay? Yes, when you come to storytelling, you know, what is the theme of tonight? I know Farid is a very modest person, but to the MC of the evening, do you know a story that is not told, that Farid was involved in the longest political crime in South Africa, what we call the Bethel crime. And that story is not told, and I've expected the MC to have mentioned it Farid, and most of those people that were sentenced went to Robben Island, life for that matter. So next time, Farid, I would expect you to brush on that story, please.
Thank you for the comment. There's one in front. This is the last one in front here. You can see if you keep it brief, we can probably keep it brief, please.
Sorry, Mike will get to you. To me, the Imam goes beyond religion in South Africa. And yes, he is a religious person, but he was concerned about the welfare of everybody in the country. And something that, just reading some of his articles this morning, became quite clear that you couldn't separate education from politics. And he died because of that. It was mentioned here. And the question I want to put to the panelists there is, it seems to me, as a teacher also, out of the system, thrown out of the system, as a teacher, I want to ask whether teachers have this kind of political role also still to play, or maybe that is something of the past.
Thank you, Brian Isaacs, for the question. I just quickly want to respond to my namesake Farid. Your question about the target audience. Yeah, I think just to, few seconds. I think it is really, it's not just the newspapers and other media, but I think we also need to look at school textbooks. So, as Kato mentioned, we celebrate 1994 as a period of liberation, but as far as education is concerned, and that brings me to your question, Mr. Isaacs, is that our syllabus really, it's so difficult really to bring the story of Imam Haron. We have present here, and I think I would ask you to give a round of applause to Mr. Frank van der Horst. This year we marked the 50th anniversary of SACOS, South African Council on Sport. They stood alone, lone fighters against racism in sport, and not acknowledged. So, yes, I think, one of the ways of getting the stories told is to really go directly into our education system. To your question, I think it's very significant that Imam Haron, one of the influences, it was the TLSA, the Teachers League of South Africa. So you're quite correct, and we spoke about the National Convention. One of the key points that Imam made was education. And I think teachers do have a role to play. In this province, we've seen you, we see Mr. Newman, for example, Wesley Newman, facing persecution for doing what I would call fulfilling the legacy of the Imam. Really tackling the mind, as Steve Biko said, it's the mind, the oppressor has really chained our mind. And I think this is where the teachers certainly have a great role to play.
Thank you, Farid.
My question is really, I've attended many meetings and presentations since the probably more than 20 with regard to the commemoration and memory of Imam. I've read a lot, and it's always a question in my mind. The Imam was a product of his society or his community at that particular point in time. And it's always want to find out what was the people or the conditions where he found himself that produced him in terms of what he became and what he was. And we know in his particular era that the injustice of the apartheid system, the apathy of the Muslim community at that particular time, I say that with a lot of respect, the Imam rose in those particular subjective conditions to stand out as a sore thumb to the rest of the particular narratives that was exercised at that point in time. So thank God and thank Allah for that there was one person that could rise above all those particular injustices and suffer and experience the consequence in terms of what happened to you. My point here is that so many years later, so many decades later of injustices, of total inhumanity in this particular country, how come? And maybe the people that's at the press need to look at that, because they know the conditions that the Imam operated in. How come in this particular country not another Imam is being produced? Why? And it's important because the Muslim community in South Africa needs an Imam, and we do not have one. And in my view, we're very far from it. So maybe we need to ask ourselves those serious questions, because we are in a bad situation because you're not producing an Imam. Thank you.
Anyone wants to respond to that?
Maybe if I sure. I mean, there's so much to say, Nadine, but let me just try to touch on some of the points, because I know time is against us and we need to wrap up. In terms of the question of the young lady early on, I think perhaps I should share this with you, that we are busy with 3 or 4, 5 little texts, hoping to share more, to shed more light on who the Imam was and is. It will be in terms of a coffee table text, lots of photographs. As you can see, the Imam was very photogenic. I know that some of our, how shall I call them, theologians, I'm not going to call them, theologians up to the north are anti-photographs, but they can say what they like. The point which I want to make is that to what extent this man was really a sociable individual. Now let me just underline what Mr. Brian Isaac indicated. Yes, he was a man for everyone. He moved in all circles. And one of the circles, and of course that's the reason why we have the rugby sort of award this evening, unfortunately we couldn't really combine it, and because of time, was he himself was very much involved in city and suburban. Union that was predominantly Christian at the time, we're talking about mid-1960s, and he brings primroses to this union. And what does he do? He changes the mindsets of individuals to respect one another, to respect the other groups other than who you are. So in that way, he basically made his contribution in a very sort of tangible way. So that is sort of how it be. So just coming back to the sort of series, we hope that the series of books and publications that will emerge hopefully soon, and I want to tie this with the reason also for many delays. Hopefully on the 9th of October, the judge will give his judgment on the reopening of the inquest. Many of you might have read about, which started in November. We had another session in March, and then on the 9th, he will be giving his verdict based upon the expert witnesses. Of course, as a family, we always knew that he was killed. We never for 1 minute doubted that. But be that as it may, the point is we waiting for that event to take, and that's the reason I should say my elder sister Shamila and her husband Ashur, they came from London to join us for this event and to basically for that event. So we are indeed happy that they are also here with us. That aside, I think in terms of ons hoor jy meer oor ons geskiedenis, and it is important that we fully grasp the past so that we can build on and try to learn from that. But we have to draw our inspiration from these heroic individuals. Whether it's Imam Haron, whether it is Steve Biko, whether it's Robert Sobukwe, whom many circles don't talk about. I'm talking about Biko and others, and of course Farid indicating that sort of clip. To what extent their lives were basically given new life through the media, and I think educating us about them. Let me just conclude then in terms of saying that, just coming back to what the team had been concerned with, why haven't we? I think we as a community need to work toward doing that. I mean, I was talking to some people about go and vote. They'll say, but I'm apolitical. I say, but your water is cut. There's no chilling. Is it because of that you are apolitical? We cannot be short-sighted in these circumstances. We need to be proactive and move out of that cocoons that we are in and look at what Imam had seen, that education is connected to your politics, politics connected to your culture, culture is connected to your history, and one can go on. So in other words, we need to look at things holistically and not have withdrawal symptoms, because we have been far too long been traumatized, like the young lady said, colonial past, the apartheid past, and now with the democratic environment that has also brought its own little mess, captured us in different ways. So yes, we need to learn from the Imam. Some ask me sometimes, how would Imam have responded to state capture? Of course, I'm not going to answer that now, but my understanding of his thinking, but the point which I would make, that he also, like Farid indicated, he drew from different sort of groupings, from the unity movement. There's no question the unity movement was a critical institution at the Cape. So he drew from that. TISA, Teachers League of South Africa, another one. And then from within the Muslim community, Ikhwan Muslimun, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, who has been banned by Sisi, not Sisa, sorry, Sisa or Sisi, whichever way you want to pronounce his name. But the point which I want to make is that these groupings contributed to the social intellectual development of those communities and of our communities, despite the fact that we are geographically different. So the Imam drew from different ones, but he stood his ground, and that of course stands out in terms of the interrogation period. By the way, there were individuals who spied on him, whether he was in Saudi Arabia, whether he was in Europe. Go to the first inquest, 1970, you will read about it. And of course, there are many other little sort of footnotes which we cannot share with you because of time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, shukran. In conclusion, sir, we're running late, so apologies for not taking your question. But in any case, I do have a one-liner, and then of course, we have one thing to do, is the vote of thanks, and of course, you can ask Professor to do it. So from my side, thank you for allowing me to officiate over the seminar. In closing, by embracing this holistic view of the Imam, we inspire to become more intentional in our actions, contributing to the reshaping, reframing, and reimagining ourselves as a community, and hopefully a better world. Thank you.
Just before Professor Harun does the vote of thanks, we were looking at what is a very symbolic gift to hand over to the presenter and the respondent and also to the foundation. And we thought the most iconic picture that you have of the Imam is the fez. And part of that fez, there's historical context to that as well, in that it was part of a movement when the Ottoman Empire came to a conclusion as a result of the colonialist agenda that was taking place in the region. And the fez became a symbol of resistance against particularly British colonial imperialism. but it also underscored the values that that any civilization should be built on. And particularly when you see in Islamic architecture, you see that there is an 8-pointed figure, or 2 squares that overlap. And the context behind that is that each of those points represents a foundational principle of a civilization. And the first point, and what the fairs now represents for us as a community to emulate, and also what the Imam stood for. And the first point on that square, being the foundational principle of civilization, is mercy. The second one is to be honest, honesty, loyalty, generosity, gratitude, humility, secrecy. And we saw how secrecy also can play in the opposite direction in the case of spying on the Imam. And the last point, the most critical one, is justice. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Professor Haron, Adnan, and then Hassanein and Mahmoud, who are partners, to hand over the gifts to firstly Uncle Farid Sayed. And Mahmoud to Zubeida Jaffer. And then one to the family, the Imam Haron family, and the representatives of the foundation.
I just need to add that my father was, this was his trademark. He had a slightly higher one, but he was known for the, so my father, unlike me, was 6'2", so it gave him many more inches. But apart from that, I think it brings back fond memories of the Imam and
For that. The party is happening next door, so you're most welcome to join that side.
Okay, thank you, Shukran Mikhail, and Shukran for these gifts. We also have gifts from the foundation that I just want to basically just express our thanks to all of them. We're not going to give it as we have just done now because of time, but let us quickly first express our heartfelt thanks to Awqaf, Mikhail, Collier, Hassanein, Shireen, and others who basically helped to set up this particular annual gathering. Alongside the Awqaf is Muslim thinker Adnan Adams, whom I have known for a while and who's been running the online Muslim Thinker project. I would encourage you to visit it. Basically, I asked him to do the MC task for this evening. The third partner in this is Muslim Views, of course. I mean, Farid and I have come a long way. We've been involved at end years of Muslim News to the beginning years of Muslim Views, and so they also run, and of course I ran away. But be that as it may, I think now I'm back, not to go back there though, but I think to support the paper, and I think all of you should get hold of the latest issue of Muslim Views because of the infographics that you have of the Imam. We hope that that in itself will become an educational tool in response to the young lady who would ask, because I think sometimes we need to give in a very succinct way aspects of the individual to have a broad overview. So we try to do that, and I hope that many of you who look at it will appreciate it, or if you don't have it, go to the website of Muslim Views, basically to find it there. Now, because I belong to two other structures, they came in also as partners. The International Peace College of South Africa, with which I'm also associated in a part-time way, and also with Al Jama-ah political party. Some of you might not like it, but I'm the CEO
unfortunately, because of that event. So it's a clash of events, you know, sometimes. But be that as it may, I think we
all the way from Paul, Vineyards Rugby. As you can see by the size, I don't know what they're feeding them in Paul, but it seems to be working. Your winners under 19, Vineyards Rugby. We wish them a very safe journey, Abu Bakr and his team. A safe journey home to Pa. Shukran. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our presentation for tonight. On behalf of Primrose Rugby, the host, we would like to say shukran and thank you to the Imam Haron Foundation, to all the dignitaries here tonight, to the Awqaf SA institution for helping us to host such a fantastic event. And we hope to see all of you again next year, inshallah. Shukran wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
as best as it can, so that our generations to come can look at the lives of these heroic individuals in addition to their death. Of course, we condemn that, but we look at how did he or she live their lives, and that is important. So, shukran jazeelan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you all move, I just want to make an appeal to say that Muslim views, if we're going to make sure that it survives, then we all have to get into our pocket. And anybody who's is able to spare 100 rand a month, like, I know it may be a lot for somebody, but a minimum of 100 or even 50 rand a month, please sign up to the Muslim Views form and make that contribution. Because if we each one give a little, we will create something more steady over a long period of time. Thank you.
Yeah.